Yeah, almost.
Doesn't almost count.
And horseshoes and hand grenades. So
Maybe. I mean, I can tell
yeah,
you what, it don't count in machining.
and it don't count in assassination attempts. So I mean,
No,
it's
you know
I tell you what,
the
we're we weren't sure if we were going to talk about it on the podcast, but I mean, we were centimeters away from having a total different conversation. So
I tell you, the y'all were at camp last week, and that's why you sound like emphysema, right?
yeah,
Like you
where
cashed
was
in your
Chris
Marlboro
at
miles for
last
a
week?
new. You sound like you cashed in your Marlboro miles for a new nice red Marlboro jacket.
Yeah, let's talk about last week for just a little bit. So
All right,
where
let's
were
talk
you
about
at, Chris?
it. I was working on my. I do a lot of mission work in Latin America, and
Uh-huh.
so
You were reconning, weren't you?
yeah, I mean, I was just just surveying the landscape, seeing, making sure that everybody speaks, talks the same way I
I heard
do.
there's a hurricane that
Lies.
came through, so you wanted to check it out, make sure
Yeah,
everybody
I
was
mean,
okay.
yeah, come on.
Okay, let's start off for just a second. Chris is not going to do a mission trip in Punta Cana. If you are, I'm going. So I'll sign me up for that one.
I tell you, no, with Jessica and I, we
Punta
did our
Cana.
we did our 20-year anniversary trip. We had saved up our credit card miles and everything like that, and so we could just kind of slide our chips to the middle of the table and cash it all in and do one of these all inclusive resorts, and
Yeah.
it for us,
When's your anniversary?
the end of May. Well, the thing
Yeah.
the thing of it is that with my daddy's eye condition now, I mean he's probably, I mean they'll probably take his license this year. I don't know if mom and daddy's listening to this, but there's certainly a lot of, the doctor told him in April, like, I could take your license now, but I can ethically lean on the fence on this one, and so just know that in October I'm going to take your license, and so because he can't hardly drive now, Mama has to do most of the driving, and so it's just a lot to get Mom and Daddy down here now, and so we just decided, the best week for us to be able to do this is while y'all are at camp, because all the boys are there, and then we could do this, and for whatever reason, I don't know why. I mean, this was like whatever the dates were last week. Today's the 15th of July, so last week, the dates were cheaper to go down there. I figured like that would be a really expensive time of the year for people to go to places like that, but it was pretty reasonable for us to go down there, and or at least we could afford it with our credit card, things or whatever it was, and so
Yeah.
it just worked out good, and it was
Yeah,
good
I
to get
mean,
away.
it makes perfect sense, don't it, Ben? I mean, for Chris, I really am sorry about your dad and everything, but we're anytime me and Ben need to help babysit your boys, so that you can go lay on the beach for a week. We're here for you, brother. We're here for
Appreciate
you.
it, man. I
here for
mean,
you.
bear one another's burdens. I mean,
Amen.
here's the funny thing is that Ricky said
Ben,
yesterday
here's
morning
the
there was
crazy. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead. We'll
he
let you
said
keep
yesterday
talking.
morning there was 125 campers,
28.
128, and like 175 staffers or something like that.
50
So-
staff, yeah.
Yeah, so apparently it takes 50 people to watch my kids while I'm not here.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So either that makes me feel
arguably,
really
man.
good, like I can do really good. I have the strength of just gonna have the strength of 25 people, or we're doing really, really bad.
Yeah. So Ben, arguably one of the most evangelistic weeks of the whole year. Chris baptized so many people last year. He ran out of shorts, and and so there was like, it was just amazing, what Chris was able to accomplish last year, at camp, and then they schedule it. It's like, well, let's go to Punta Cana instead.
I actually, Jessica and I, we went back and forwards and back and forwards. We went, round and round in our head on this, separately and collectively.
I'm sure you did, but we're still going to give you grief about it.
Oh, yeah, and we, we thought about this, Bob, one side up, one side down the other, and one of the things that we really did think about was, you're right. I did baptize a lot of people, and while that's true and that tells a great story of camp, but there's some inherent challenges with that in the fact that you left here because you said there's just too much talent, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I thought about this and and it's really important. When you sent me that picture of like Carson and Aiden and those guys doing Bible studies, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how those came about. I don't know like the story of how the Bible study happened or whatever. And I don't even know if you know the story or not. But all I'm saying is that there's a real if you'd asked the apostles on the Last Supper night, the Leonardo's little scene where Jesus is in the upper room, right?
Right.
And if you'd asked those guys, hey, y'all look, we got two options. All right. So tomorrow we're just going to kind of start this whole process. It's going to be a mess for a few days. And then, we got about 6 or 8 weeks and I'm going to heaven and it's going to be on y'all's shoulders then, or let's do next year's Passover, right? Let's do next year's Passover. Let's just use this as kind of like our farewell tour, and then maybe next year we'll take the cross route. Which one do you think they would have taken? Right. And
right.
And you realize you see that, and I thought about some of the conversations that you and I've had, and we've talked about here on the podcast, and it's really important for you think about all those guys like Ben and Wesley and Sean and Taylor, and all those guys that are in their mid-20s, to really be doing that, and I think there's a powerful component of it too, because when you got, let's just face it, our kids, I mean, Carson and Aiden, I mean, they're the ones that are all that age. I say our kids collective, the 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, they think they're 25. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And so they're going to identify with Ben and Taylor and all those guys that are 25. How old are you, Ben? 24. Yeah, all those guys that are that age. And I don't know, I think that, us staying up till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then me trying to sleep 15 minutes through Dane banging a drum and playing a trumpet at the same time. I don't know how somebody can snore at the same time in 3 different octaves. I just don't understand that. And so, this staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning thing and doing Bible studies and all this, that, and the other, I think there's a point where, you can really kind of move into the shadows and it really long-term be more beneficial.
Yeah,
so,
it plays a toll on you, but what you're talking about is just being able to, pass the baton, allow the next, generation to take over. But also, there's guidance that's needed, and but it is a blessing, And I found out later that, I'd had some good conversations with Dayton, and he's probably the most improved camper of my from a year before, to this year, and it was Dayton that started that Bible study.
Yeah.
And
well, there you go. And
yeah, and so it was but there was, so he's studying or whatever, and then then Carson and Aiden joined in, to back him up. But and then he ended up, Dayton ended up baptizing his his stepbrother or half brother, or whatever it is. And so that was a cool thing. And that was, and so I do want to talk to our listeners about this conversation that we had. So Dayton, is a kid who'd been adopted by someone at KW, and all that's public knowledge. I say public, well-known knowledge. And so but he still had some challenges. Him and his brother both had been adopted, and then Dayton had made some poor choices, even to the point that his parents had chose to allow the court system to be involved. And anyways, he was sent, to try to get reformed. And anyways, he come back and he's been doing good. He talked to me about the respect that he's got with his parents now, and then just how he said, I've been making good choices for 2 months. And he said, I want to keep making those good choices. And I said, well, the best thing I can tell you to do, just shooting from the hip, is you need to go all in with the youth group. And he said, yeah, he said, I really want to. He said, I want to be there on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. And of course, they're an hour away from KW. And so we were working through some of those things, and I was giving him ideas of families to talk to. And hopefully this will encourage his parents as well. But, so then he said, my personality, he said, my guidance counselor or whoever it was, that a psychologist, somebody who talked to him said that he doesn't need to be idle, and he doesn't need to get bored, because when he does, that's whenever he makes some poor decisions. And so then I got to talking to him about really changing his legacy. And I said, look, man, I said, you're 15 right now, between 15 and 18, you find a way to make and save $10 a day. And we were just looking at building wealth, in Christianity. And he was saying, hey, well, you go all in $10 a day, $300 a month. That's a goal to set when you're 15 to try to be putting away $300. And he was talking to me about some money that he's already saved. And I said, yeah, but we're just talking about building wealth. And so we were going through a bunch of different scenarios, and those calculators, interest calculators are amazing. And like a kid's eyes can really be open to a lot of those things. And God's people we don't need to be, wealth is not the number one thing, but Christians, it's an amazing thing when you can build some wealth, and you have no question whether or not it'll just be your time only, whether or not you're going to go on a mission trip. It won't be funded, in which it shouldn't be now anyways. I've never had trouble getting funding to go preach the gospel somewhere. Nevertheless, so we talked about all that, and then I said, hey, so you stand before God and you right now, I said, and you got 10 million that you've made. And I said, just off the interest alone, we were talking about those things. I said, but what happens whenever you stand before God and you got 10 million? I said, what are you going to say to all that? He said, well, I won't have it with me. He had a pretty good understanding that when he stands before God, the 10 million won't be present.
Right.
And I said, that's right. I said, no, let's think about souls for a minute. And he said, all right. And I said, right now at 15, how many souls you think that you might could reach? He's like, well, I don't know. Of course, that whole thing, I don't know how many souls I could reach. I said, well, let's just focus in. I said, let's say that you set a goal right now that for now at 15 years old until you're 65, and the Lord takes you at 65, and you decide that you're going to try to impact 5 souls a year. I said, you could stand before the Lord, and I said, you'd have a whole KW standing with you. You could have 250 souls who are standing with you and say, Lord, this is what I brought. This is who I've brought to you. And I said, that's one soul every 73 days. And so I challenge every person that's listening to our podcast for you to try to impact 5 souls a year. And those 5 souls, we did all the math of all the different ways of how that we can convert the whole world. But 5 souls a year, that's one soul every 73 days. And so you and your family, husband and wife, or just you, however, every 73 days, mark it out. I'm gonna try to impact somebody during this 73-day period. And he took that serious. He said, all right. And guess who he started with?
His brother. Right. And
so, he's like, let's study about this. And so next thing you know, 2 days later, he's like, Mr. Bob, he's wanting to be baptized. And I'm like, amen, and all
right. So time starts again, 72.
That's right. Yeah. And of course, then now he's got 72 days to encourage his brother, build him up, help him out.
Also, it'll give him some responsibility, to some degree, because as well as I do, Bob, that you have a sense of responsibility to people that you've been part of their conversion process. Mm-hmm. Whenever you go through this, there's just all these quote unquote P's and Q's that you have to in your mind work out. You and I have known each other long enough that we know each other's flaws in the sense of, like I know what's wrong with you, and you know what's wrong with me. And
right.
But when you've got this brand new baby Christian, and I'm not saying you're acting any different. I'm just saying that that it's really important time, and you're going to pour into them in a really special way, and you know how important it is for them to be around the church, to get involved with the church, to you're going to be really beating the bushes, hard, to make sure to ensure their success, as a member of the church, a functioning member of the body.
That's right. And that's what none of us are immune. None of us are immune to death. I mean, you think about this. I mean, a pop shot from a 20-year-old, grazed the president of the United States.
Is that how old this boy was?
He's 20. Yeah, 20, 22. I'm not sure. I think it's 20.
I don't even know what. I mean, I was on the plane coming. We had actually, and I probably wouldn't have even saw it, but we got bowed up in the airport in Punta Cana coming back, and they were going to bring our plane in, and it messed up, and they had to turn it around and go back. We're going to fly to Dallas, and so they were going to bring us one from Miami. Well, the one from Miami won't going to get us to Dallas in time to get us to New Orleans at night to come home. So I said, well, I told Jessica, I said, we're just going to stay the night in Dallas, which we're going to get in by that point, because in the plane they were bringing from Miami, they brought it and they had to turn it around. It was just two planes were messed up. And so anyways, we were going to get to Dallas to like 3 a.m. And then we had to get on a flight at New Orleans at like 6, to get to New Orleans at, get the flight to New Orleans at 6. I was like, we just got to figure we're not going to sleep tonight. It's just not going to happen. And I said, I'm going to call American. I called American and I made Jessica stand there. When I got somebody online, I was like, keep talking to him. And she stood there and I was like, keep asking him, are you there? And just keep talking to him. And so I'm standing there at the Delta counter. I'm going to buy my ticket, because if it's mechanical failure, like the airlines have to compensate you up to, I think, 4 times is what the amount is. And so of your ticket price, I was like, okay, so if I figure half my ticket was $800, that's $1,600 I figure that I got to spend on tickets,
Per ticket.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, so the Delta counter, I buy my ticket on Delta, cancel it, and I'm on the Delta flight. Well, Delta is the only one that I know of now, a domestic carrier. I've flown some international ones that have the little TV in the headrest, but most of them now don't have the TV in the headrest. Well, Delta does. And I could see a lot of the people around me had the news on. They had the news on, and I saw it. And it was like, I just saw a shooter in Pennsylvania. I mean, and this may even sound terrible, but I just didn't think nothing about a shooter. I mean, just because the news loves, every time some Yahoo fires around, they love to blow it up, like something crazy. So I didn't pay it much attention to it. And then they started down this, I started watching it, they would change. And I was like, I think that somebody shot at former President Trump is what it looked like. And then, then you're trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Did they shoot him? I mean, you just didn't know what had happened, but apparently they nicked him. Right? I mean, what did they do? They know what they shot at him with?
He got within 100 and 150 yards of Trump with an AR.
So he was it a 223 round he was shooting at him on like a 308 or something?
They think it was something like that. I'm pretty sure it was a 223, 5.56.
Right.
But what happened though, it's a building that's outside the venue, and this just goes to show too. I mean, and I'm pretty chapped about it. We can send billions of dollars, to Iran or Ukraine,
these countries that hate us,
these countries that actually hate America, and then, but yet we can't have our security already beefed up, on a front runner presidential candidate. They were supposed to beef up his security today. There's
today was the D-Day for security beef.
This week is what I understand. And so, because he's supposed to be, I guess, quote unquote, named as the leader of the party or whatever. And that's whenever the Secret Service takes the next step. So, and I actually was seeing things last night. There was only one full-time agent on Trump's thing.
Security detail.
Detail that there were a bunch of temporary people.
So did they shoot the guy? Is that what they did?
Yeah, they took him out, and the sniper team wasn't allowed, wasn't agreed upon to be there until the day before. And so
sniper team there.
Yeah, the sniper team was there. Snipers took him out, but there's only 2 sniper teams, and they're having to cover 360 pretty much.
Right.
But there was buildings that were next door on adjacent property, and this guy put a ladder up and went up on there. Well, people are seeing him, and there's all these news reports. They're like, we've seen him, we're pointing to him. Well, news came out last night that supposedly an officer had climbed up on that roof and confronted this guy. And the guy turns around and points an AR at him, and the officer retreats back down the ladder. But that's what made this guy scurry up, and so he's bear crawling and scurrying pretty quick. And it was kind of when the officer went down. Now this guy's going to start taking the pop shots.
Oh,
and so it wasn't like he was able to get.
Yeah,
huh?
He only had a small window because
he knew he had been
coming. Right.
Yeah, and so it was bystanders that points him out, and just one officer going up the ladder. And I don't know the whole confrontation that just kind of got leaked on Sunday, the 14th. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come on it, but that very well, the guy's heart rate being up. When I went to their sniper school, some of that shooting, I think I've shared some of that on the podcast. But one of the times we had to shoot as a police sniper was, that. There was the regular shots and those things, but then we had to shoot.
What do you mean regular shots? What do you mean
regular shots? Just laying down behind your gun, and then it's like, okay, I've been shooting this for a week, and so now I'm gonna
just lying prone position, popping.
I got to put 5 in the bullseye, in a 2-inch ring, because an Army sniper versus a police type sniper is different, because police have to shoot for what's called flaccid paralysis. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but there's a zone there's a zone in a headshot that you need to hit that to where if a gunman has a hostage, when you hit him in this particular zone, there's flaccid paralysis where he cannot even squeeze the trigger even in his death. And so it cuts off, everything.
It cuts off the electricity, turns the power off.
So that's what's called flaccid paralysis. And
all right.
So you're shooting for that, and so the precision has to be much tighter. So a military sniper is going to be shooting at 600-800 yards most of the time, and all they're shooting for is to make someone combat ineffective. Meaning, if I hit Chris Donovan in the arm, all right. He's not an effective sniper anymore. Right. He still might take a pop shot, but he's going to have to take care of himself. And he's like, man, I'm out of this.
Right.
And so. You could be in the fight at 10 feet and 100 feet. You're gonna fight to your death with one arm, but you're not going to be an effective sniper at 600 yards, 800 yards. Anyways, so that's kind of the difference. Well, one of the scenarios that we had to shoot at sniper school was we had to shoot 5 rounds in 30 seconds, and with a bolt gun, and hit inside this 2-inch target. Well,
okay, so y'all just shooting like a 30, Remington.
It was a 308. Ours was cheap, government issued, Remington 700s with a deer hunting scope on it.
That's what I imagine a Remington 700, like the old black stock.
Yeah, and so those guys, it looked like they were shooting $15,000, Secret Service rifles. But anyways, And then one of the last scenarios in the daytime was you had to get an elevated heart rate. We had to run, do push-ups, do sit-ups, and then sprint back another 100 yards. And so your heart rate's elevated. And you had to make the first shot when you hit your knees. You had to make the first shot within it was something, I don't remember if it was 10 or 20 seconds. Like you had to make the first shot within like a 10-second range once you got behind your gun. And then after that, you had the 30 seconds you had to fire the other 4 within that 30-second window. And so it's like, I think they gave us 20 seconds to fire the first round. So you had 20 seconds to catch your breath, but your heart rate's up in that,
Does a 700 even hold 5 shots? I don't even know if a 700 holds. It does.
Yeah.
I may know somebody that's got one, but I have to think about the magazine on it.
Yeah. And so that was just kind of the scenario, but so if you're not trained, when your heart rate is up, this guy's bear crawling across this thing, his heart rate's up. Of course, he's thinking, I'm fixing to take a shot at the most arguably one of the most important people in the United States. And then now his whole thing, people are seeing me, they're yelling gun, and then a police officer comes up and confronts me. He's like, it's go time. I mean, his heart rate was probably 200 beats a minute when he's trying to take this shot. And so
if he hit Trump's ear, right? I think that what he hit him in the ear.
Yeah.
Did it just like nick him, or did it is his ear tore off?
You can't tell because he's turned looking at a teleprompter and he's looking in the direction of the shooter. And so everybody was like, since he's looking at his teleprompter, getting these numbers for whatever he was talking about the border or something, that people were arguing, they were saying, hey, this whole thing's fake, to start with, because he kept looking for so long. And then he shoots, he hears something, he feels, and then he realizes, okay, I'm getting shot at, and he hits the ground. And so, people were yelling the whole fake thing until they realized this fireman, and that's another thing. And this fireman who it was in Pennsylvania. I mean, he hears the shots and he covers his wife and daughter and takes the rounds for them and gets killed. And so, people were yelling, that guy giving his life was, I believe, validation to a lot of American people that, okay, this thing was real,
Yeah.
And,
what a mess too.
What a mess. And so everybody's expendable. And
I hate politics so much.
I do too. But this is not, that's not just politics, the challenges. Politics, we're supposed to settle our differences and, in debates and talks and we as Americans, we're allowed to speak, and that's one of your First Amendment rights, that you have the right to the freedom of speech, and that is a powerful thing. So
have any of the since this, typically speaking, it's the more progressive leaning politics that are always banging the anti-gun drum. Are they banging that drum now?
I hadn't heard anybody yet. I'm sure that there'll be something.
I think the biggest thing is just beefed up security is what, both sides are saying.
Yeah, I just wonder, whenever these shootings happen, shooting a school or something crazy, all the left-wing guys jump up and start hollering anti-gun, and now I just wonder if this fits their rhetoric or not. In my opinion, and you got to be careful when that happens. But so you think about, okay, what if there was no guns on the good guy side? And so this guy is shooting. This shooter was stopped in somewhere around 16 seconds, and but because the snipers couldn't see him because he's on the other side of a roof line. He's on the back side of the pitch.
He's on the back side of the pitch of the peak. Just if you imagine my ring being where the shooter, he's crawled on that side of the roof line, and then the Trump is on this side.
Right.
He's standing over here somewhere, and so the anti-sniper team's over here. But here's the thing. There's big time failure. There's a building that cannot be that there's no one assigned to this building. And it's 150 yards.
Anytime something like this happens, there's always a failure. It's just the you can't mitigate against every kind of scenario. No. There's just no way to do it.
Yeah, but 15 years after Barbara Bush, she's George H.W.'s wife,
Right.
And am I getting that right?
Yep, that's right. Herbert Walker.
Yep. Yeah. So I was on a security detail for her. She was going to be, and so I worked with the Secret Service then, and so that was she still had about 6 Secret Service people attached to her, and so there was, and then they were just relying on local law enforcement for the rest of it.
Right.
We have motor officers to get her in and out. Kind of a little bit of a, but 15 years after, she hadn't been a
so 15 years ago would have been 2016 then.
No, I think this was like around the 2010 range. I think it was.
So her husband hadn't been president since. I mean, I was a kid, so we're looking at what 88 to 92.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Is she was at least post 15 years later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying.
After being a diplomat, and so being a first lady and
really, I'm not trying to denigrate her what her position was, but nowhere near the impact of influence.
No, and there, if you wanted to, I can remember going to school whenever Clinton was in office, and you're hearing the whole Monica Lewinsky things on the radio in the mornings. I mean, that's how news was going.
Right.
And so whatever kind of snippet of news that you got in the 8-minute ride to school, that's kind of what we got. That was our social media,
Well, you were rich, Bob, because we had to ride the bus.
Yeah.
They come and got us on this big yellow thing that had windows all the way down it. And
I rode the bus too as a kid. Yeah. But my mama, when my mom took on, when my little brother got bigger or whatever, she started getting paid by people to pick up other kids. My mom became the minibus, and so she literally got gas money for people to go take their kids, to school and whatever, and then she would go to work. So my mom was, she was trying to. She's
a capitalist, man. I'm telling you, dude.
Capitalist.
She's the OG Uber,
That's right. And so our kids could get up, 30 minutes later, and she made some money taking them to school. So
Sister Tips running the caravan.
That's right. It's like, whoop, whoop. Yeah. So, but there's just big time figures. But like, even so, it was our responsibility to make sure that adjacent. That all the doors at this place, she was going to be an honorary graduate of Sewanee University, and so you can Google whatever year that was if it's real important to whoever, but because I don't remember exactly which year it was, but I was suit and tie detail, and so there was officers that were standing.
You had to wear a Sunday go to meeting clothes or something.
Yeah, I had to wear a Sunday suit and tie security, and so. Everybody who had to work with the Secret Service, I'm not going to give all their secrets, but they gave a specific, they didn't care about a badge. They said, when we're coming through, we're looking for this one thing. And it was at the time, it was an object that they gave us to put on our uniform. And so as a cop, a road deputy, he had to get this thing pinned on his uniform. Me in a suit and tie, I had to have this thing pinned on my uniform. They said, we know that you're an ally. And they said, we know that you've been briefed by us. And so I was involved in that much of a briefing for a former first lady that nobody cared about.
To get a pretend degree.
And we got people, I mean, we were looking at the whole, diagrams and where everybody's at. And it's like, but yet you're going to allow somebody to get on a roof at 150 yards from Trump? I mean.
Last night, on Sunday nights now at KW, we always have a big ton of people that go out to eat, and I don't know, sometimes I feel sorry for the poor Mexican restaurants. It's 30 or 40 people that do it now, but they said last night that the other guy, RFK, the Kennedy guy that's running, that he don't even have a detail. So they're not even giving him a security detail. They don't even consider him it's just. I don't know, man. It's here's the thing.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a mess, and at the end of the day, Bob, I'm telling you, man. Like, this is just I'll just say this, and I have to be very, very, very careful about the things that I say about stuff like this. I'll just say that I have seen some of the most advanced military technology, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay. And if you don't understand what that means, what I mean when I'm saying that you just have to take my word for it. And hopefully I've got enough clout with our listeners that you can just agree with that. You'll just take my word on what I'm saying. But that has never been our might. I mean, I've seen all this stuff, and I've been part and parcel to just some of the most, Star Trek looking stuff that you've ever thought about. But that's never really been our might. I'll tell you this, that when a ragtag group of farmers beat the biggest standing military, the most advanced trained, literally, that the world had ever known, and I mean beat them to where they could not even understand when Cornwallis, when he finally throws the white flag at Yorktown. I mean, he could not
He's
even
in shock.
He could not even conceive of the fact that they lost this. I mean, it's just like it would be like, Case or Bo being like, I think I'm gonna take a title fight at the Old Man.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you're just like, okay, well, I have to go through this process. I get it, because now this is where we're at, but I know how this is going to end. And
yeah, America chapter 1 was David and Goliath.
Yeah, exactly. And the hard part for us to sometimes conceptualize is that, you think about like, politics has been a problem, I mean, from time immortal, Bob. I mean, you go all the way back. Let's just go all the way back to, I don't know, you can pick, if you want to start at Moses and Pharaoh, you can. The God had to finally show Moses that he was in charge, and he had to show Pharaoh that he was in charge. I mean, God, you remember Moses at the burning bush when he's like in Exodus, that first 2 or 3, 4 chapters right there when this whole scenario is kind of unfolding. And Moses is like, well, I mean, you know who I'm going to see, right? I mean, this is Pharaoh. I mean, every person from Abraham forward, every person, I mean, just think about this from Genesis 12, every single word in the entirety of the Bible lived during the time of the Egyptian Empire. Even into the Ptolemies and into the Greco split, I mean, they're still ruling in Egypt down there. I mean, this is still, Egypt has its still territory. I mean, this is the longest running dynasty, as it were, ever. Well, you think about those things, man. And like Moses has got this question, like, well, who am I going to tell him? I mean, you know who we're talking about? And you just think about asking God that question. Just think about asking God the question, Lord, who am I going to, I mean, like, okay, I got to go see Pharaoh, man. I mean, who am I?
Arguably, Chris, our people ask that question all the time because who they're more afraid to stand in front of is whoever it is that they're going to have a Bible study with instead of Almighty God. And so we're saying, what should I tell them whenever I'm? And so it's pride that's going to keep you from going to heaven, and it's pride that's going to keep your friend from going to heaven because you won't open God's word with them.
Yeah, and so you think about how pitiful. I mean, like, okay, let's Pharaoh, who is the God that I should obey him, right? I mean, Pharaoh, he's the day and evening star. This idea, I mean, the Japanese. You know what Japan is called? The land of the. Can you finish that statement?
No, the land of the rising sun. They think the sun comes up on them first. Yeah.
Yeah, they think that they're literally the first ones that the sun rises on. Like we're so important that if the sun doesn't rise on us, then it won't rise on the rest of the world. Well, Pharaoh said, "I'm the day and evening." That's the same idea. It's not that he had intellectually come to this conclusion that he's literally the center of the universe. He's literally the center of the world. That he's such an important person as this ruler. That's politics, Bob. I mean, Satan has got the same hat that you look at even to Jesus's day. It was Simon thought that his politics was what was going to change the world. But it wasn't. It was Jesus. It wasn't his politics. It was Jesus. And so for us as Americans, I just want to emphasize this one thing. I'm so glad that former President Trump didn't die. And I don't know who will be elected in November. I saw a picture of Trump with like American flag behind him and his fist kind of in the air or something like that. Somebody shared on social media. And I thought, that's a Pulitzer Prize, one of them magazine cover pictures right there. And that'll probably be the one that wins the election for him if he wins. But that won't change anything about what you got to do tomorrow. I don't know. The election's always around my birthday, 1st of November. And I don't know when it is this year, but I know this, that whatever happens the next day, it will not change no matter how people respond and act. I mean, this guy that obviously takes a shot at him on the roof. I mean, think about you're sitting here you're talking about all the, detail that y'all have to put into to making sure this place is secure. Well, on the other side of the coin, this guy's got to figure out how to work around all that stuff. You have this opposing force over here, him trying to figure out. And look, let's just be honest. He did a pretty good job. I mean, he was, 2 fingers width away if he nicked his ear. Did you say it was the bullet that hit him or fragmentation? Do they know?
We don't know. I mean, we think it's a bullet, but I don't know. I don't know if it hit, if it hit a teleprompter. There was early reports that maybe it hit a teleprompter, and I would imagine those got ballistic protection, but who knows if they do or not. But anyways, it's he was hit from a fragmentation of something, whether it was a bullet frag or whatever. But there's actually a picture that somebody slowed down a video enough to capture that the bullet is flying so fast that it looks like it's the length of like an ink pen.
Oh, I've seen that. I did see that. I've only seen like 3 or 4 pictures, and that's the one that I did see.
It's kind of past him or whatever. But there's this is by the time Pharaoh, by the time you get to the 8th plague of locust, Pharaoh's still, his heart's still, he's still in this whole thing or whatever, but
he's still wrapped up in his politics.
Yeah. In chapter 10, verse 7, this is one of my favorite verses. It's the only thing that's underlined from whatever, you have your page, chapter 9, verse 7 through chapter 10, verse 15 on my Bible. And so all these verses, the only thing that I've got underlined is part of verse 7. And I've got squared up, Egypt is destroyed. And so chapter 10, verse 7, then Pharaoh's servant said to him, how long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed? And so you got this dude who thought he was nothing, watching after his father-in-law's sheep. Moses is saying, who shall I say sent me? What we have to realize in the church is that it's God that gives the increase. Amen. It's God who does these things. Now, it's not God's will for a president of the United States to get shot or former president of the United States to get shot. It's not God's will for a dude to climb on the roof and be an active shooter or to walk into a mall or into a school. That is not God's will. God gives you and I free will. And what we have to understand is that Jesus is the one who has overcome the world. He said, in this world, you're going to have tribulation. Be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. But in arguably, I don't know how many days this is. I haven't gone back and calculated it up. And I don't even know if we can calculate the days, that when Moses goes to Pharaoh. But, by the time you get to Exodus 12, God's like, okay, this is going to, whatever month this is, it's going to be the first of your month. And so I get kind of confused, but I like looking at some of those things. I think it helps people capture it in their minds about. But so Moses goes to Pharaoh, him and Aaron, and God kicks this thing off with them, and he's not showing Moses his power. He's showing his power through this.
Right.
Pharaoh's intercepting his politics is interceding and meeting the God of the universe. And with this, he said, don't you know that Egypt's destroyed? And so Pharaoh's been so caught up with what's going on in front of him that he's missed this whole thing. That, man, this old shepherd guy, former Pharaoh, grandson of a Pharaoh, and I don't know if it's the same Pharaoh or not. That was Moses's.
I can't remember
step grandpa. But either way, he would have known.
Yeah, that's right.
He would have known who Moses was, and
especially when Moses talked to him. Moses would have talked to him in a way that was, conducively, correct. And
everybody's like, well, how do you know that? Well, Stephen's sermon that got him stoned, he talks about that Moses was learned, in all those language, wisdom, and he was powerful in wisdom and speech.
Yeah, just the idea that Moses uses cubits to measure the ark out and stuff like that. Those are Egyptian measurements.
And
so,
yeah.
What did I say?
Moses, but that's fine.
Well, Moses, I'm saying Moses writing about Noah building the ark is what I meant by that.
You're talking about
Moses wrote Genesis, and so I'm saying when Moses wrote about, because if we'd have wrote it today, we'd have said, X amount of feet, is what we'd have said,
I'm with you.
We wouldn't use meters.
Right. Unless you drive a Ford now, right? You got the metric now.
Oh, you communist out there. Anyways, go ahead.
So Egypt's destroyed. And so God is using a dude who thought he was worthless. I mean, Moses is 40 years old when he leaves Egypt, and he's going to go out, and then he meets Jethro, starts watching sheep. He watches sheep for 40 years. Then he's 80 years old.
80. When he 80 old.
80 years old, and God's starting with him. That's one thing I like telling our old people in the church. It's like, hey, Moses started at 80. Abraham was circumcised at 99. And so everybody's like, well, Colonel Sanders didn't fry his first piece of commercial chicken until he's 65.
Yeah, he done it with a Social Security check.
Yeah, and so I mean, you just not like we go. Well, I'm all washed up and I can't do anything. Yes, you can.
Right.
Like and so this
what
is
you can do. You're basing it on your works instead of what God can do.
Instead of what God can do. Listen, I got to tell everybody, and I shared this story. You were there, Chris, that Sunday morning. That story of the guy who I met at Decatur. And that he went to Beltline Church of Christ. He didn't start in evangelism till he was, like 45 years old, and spent 20 something years going to doing jail ministry. And the guy stood at 96 years old. Matthew McMullen was, and in the Beltline Church of Christ, he said, he can't hardly walk, son. And he's like, whoever you need me to study the Bible with, I'm ready today. And how many 96-year-olds show up for a conference?
Right.
And then number on a Saturday.
Right. Man.
And then number two, say whoever you need me to study with, I'm ready. He knew arguably that he couldn't stand in that line to feed to get his plate. He knew that.
Right.
But he's counting on God to provide.
Well, too, I mean, you just think about, Bob, what there's so many things that are out to get us. I mean, just so many, like, here's something crazy, Bob. You remember when let's see here. I don't remember when it was, but maybe even Ben went with us. We had to go over to when we used to work with the school, the Hattiesburg schools here, and they'd invited us over for something.
Yeah.
And we told them that, they had all these different social clubs up there giving their little checks and taking their pictures. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we said, hey, we're going to go over here and run the food line. We'll go over here and just serve. Remember that?
Yep.
Well, here's the crazy thing. Somebody from I don't even know where this came from. They had that on the news last week. I've had 2 or 3 people come to me and say, I'm not kidding you. I said, I saw y'all on the news. And I was like, really? And they was like, it was showing you at a school at one of the schools. And I was like, man, you think about how long ago, I don't know when that was. That was a year ago, or maybe
it was like almost maybe 3 years.
Yeah, whatever it was, right?
Chris, I've been gone a year.
Okay, well, whatever it was, time's one of them elusive things. It's like trying to hold on to a snake in the water, but
it's just been 3 or 4 years. That tells you they're begging for some new stuff,
Look, Bob, I'm telling you, and that's think about the I ain't trying to put the spotlight on us. I'm not trying to say that, but the fact that they had us on there instead of all those people trying to, look, think about all them big civic organizations that were there. And I don't want to mention any names because I'm not going to lend any credence because I don't agree with most of them that were there, to be honest with you.
And hey, we were there. We were pretty much a minority in that school.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And
what did the school say? What did all the teachers think of the social groups?
Oh, yeah. Tell them, Ben.
They just said they're there for the photo op. They would give the money, at the picture and the check.
And they left, remember? They took their pictures and hit the door, after they got their picture done.
Yeah, and then they knew we had brought, we brought barbecue over there from the church to feed the teachers. The teachers knew that. Yeah. They knew we were investing in them and the kids. And then, there's a day where we brought snow cones over there for them all. Yeah. And then they saw the whole stuff. I was riding shotgun of Chris's robotic stuff, and I don't know anything. I'm learning with the kids, and Chris is teaching all this stuff, and yeah, it was fun, but it was good for me. They expect they're asking me questions. They're like, so how does this work? I'm like, well, let's just wait. You'll find out, And so I'm, fake it till you make it. But,
you think about this and I suppose in my mind, we never really thought about like, hey, let's just not worry about the photo ops. Let's just go over here and let's just work the lunch line. I never thought about the fact that, how do you say, like, I never thought about the fact that we would end up doing the best thing by doing the least thing. Yeah, is that what I'm making sense? Am I saying that right?
That's because when you truly humble yourselves, it'll get exalted, and that's what the Lord tells us. And this is Moses' excuses. Every excuse that Christians give today as to why they won't open God's word with their friends or neighbors or family members. And Moses had all the excuses. I don't have enough speech. I'm not talented enough. Who me? Who am I? There's all these things you go through and you just read and the excuses of Moses in Exodus 3 and 4 that he has, and then you ask yourself, what's my excuse? And I'll just tell you, it's not God's will. It wasn't God's will for Joseph's brothers to fake his death and to put him into human trafficking. Right. You want the first human trafficking story ever, you go look at the book of Genesis and you read the story of Joseph, Jacob's son.
The first recorded story.
The first recorded story of human trafficking. Right. That's right. And so it's not God's will that Joseph be sold into slavery.
But Genesis 50:20, man.
Yeah, Genesis 50:20. And so he says, you meant this for evil. God used it for good. It's the idea, what I want everybody to understand, there's nothing that can happen outside the will of God, but God gives you and I free will, and he is not going to stop a shooter's finger from pulling a trigger to do evil. He's not going to stop that.
Yeah, I mean, now, he made your muscles to do everything everybody else's does. So this,
and he gives a shooter the free will to do those things, just the same way that he gave that officer the free will to stand there while shots are getting fired and sniper fire back at this guy. Right. This is in the same way that somebody in administration had the free will to punch the ticket to put more agents on the ground or less agents on the ground. So there's all these factors that you can speak up and you can do these things. Well, there was a woman at camp, and this year that they used to go to KW before I became a preacher there. And so I met Kevin and Regina. Well, people that know Regina, she lost her leg in a lawnmower situation when she was 8 years old. So she spent her 8th birthday in the hospital, and she had her leg amputated.
You said that real weird, a lawnmower situation.
Well, I mean, how else are you going to lose your leg in a lawnmower other than a lawnmower blade? She ran out.
It's just a situation like it could be some other kind of possibility besides the blade.
All I know is that a lawnmower blade took her leg. And
right. Okay, I don't mean to laugh
when she was a kid. And so the pain and suffering thing people like, how can a loving God allow a kid to suffer at St. Jude? Or how could a loving God allow an active shooter to do this? How can a loving God allow, President Trump to be, former President Trump to have an assassination attempt on him and him be, injured? And so people will say those things. Well, God used Moses. All right. Well, it wasn't God's will that Regina ran out there, or whoever it was on the lawnmower was paying attention, wasn't paying attention, any of those kind of things.
Right.
Whatever it was that happened. All right. But here's what God's in the business of doing, is he's in the business of taking whatever bad situation that's there and turning it into something really good.
Yeah.
And so now she's been married for 37 years. I don't know how old she is now, but Regina's been married to Kevin for 37 years. Well, I can just tell you, we're sitting there at camp, and she's helping in the kitchen. And Courtney said, Courtney comes to me like Tuesday or Wednesday, and she's like, Bob, she is walking circles around me. And I said, yeah, baby, she's only got one leg, I'm messing with Courtney.
Hopping circles.
Yeah. And so I was telling, so Regina's got this, before everybody starts firing off at me, about all these things. Regina's the type of person, she went and hid during manhunt.
Yeah.
And then she had them hide her leg on the barbecue grill. And so she said, the kids are going to have to find all of me before they get the points. Yeah. So that's just the kind of person that she is. All right. And so she's got a sense of humor about her disability, you know? And so she's, anyways, that's great. Chris, it's funny. So,
Ben, did you play basketball against her?
I didn't get the opportunity.
I figured you just
Ben would have tried.
And smoked her.
But here's the point: is that it's not God's will that 8-year-old girl lost her leg,
right?
When she was a little girl. But her daddy told her. He said, "Ain't nobody in life gonna feel sorry for you. You better get after it." And so she does. And so she, all the people who could have an excuse not to go to camp, or everybody who could say, I'm not going to serve God. I wasn't a punch at you, Chris. You can take it that way if you want. But of all the people who
always do, Bob.
But of all the people who could say, I can't go do something or I can't go serve God's people, 170 people had to be fed 3 times a day, and Regina is in there smoking it, son, walking around. And I mean, like, how there's a lot of people who kind of stand around, like, i.e. Bob, in the kitchen, kind of like I'm in there for the social hour, talking to everybody, encouraging them with Christian. I'll cut up a cucumber, I'll kind of talk and make jokes about all this kind of stuff. Like they're like, we need another watermelon out of the fridge. You don't have to wait for a volunteer. You don't have to go, well, I guess I'll go get it, because Regina was going after the thing. She's getting like 15,000 steps in a day. And so people could say, okay, I can't do this. And how many legs do you have?
Well,
she's got one.
Bob.
Yeah, that's right. And she's hammering. And so this, anyway, she was an example of me, and example to me. And John, what is it? John 9, when you got the blind man.
Yeah, the man born blind.
Yeah, right. They said, hey, his disciples said, Jesus, Lord, who sinned, this guy or his parents? And he said, neither, but the works of God may be seen,
Yeah.
And through him. And so, this is the works of God are evident if you just stop and look, and then also if you'll take your situation, and so you can go, oh, I can't do this. So you think of anybody who couldn't do something. All right, Carson brought this up in his devotional. If anybody had the excuse in the world that I can't do it, it would be Mary. Like there are a few things in life that really get thrown our way that we're not expecting, because we expect people to die. We expect people to get injured. We expect troubles to come. Murphy's Law, right? Hot water heaters are going to go out. You expect these things to happen. You expect, flights to be delayed, right? You're going to have to pay for different tickets. There are some airplanes that don't have things, and y'all probably had a couple of cloudy days down there in Punta Cana. It was probably terrible and
horrible.
And it's Chris, it was by Monday that we had our first. We had 24 hours in, and we got our first turd in the shower in cabin 5.
Listen, let me tell you the story about this guy, man. I know exactly what you're talking about, because Josh Bracey and I were standing there at the counter, like the canteen counter, and I know exactly who you're talking about, because this little boy is a firecracker, son. And
he was my bunkmate. He was my bunkmate always.
Josh Bracey and I were standing there, and he said, we were just talking. He said, he walked up to me. He's like, what y'all doing? Now, just got to think, like, we're standing there. I was talking to Alex Dickerson and his wife, Macy, and he's like 8. Ain't the little boy 8 years old?
Yeah, something like that.
7 or 8.
Yeah, he walks by, and he just smacks Macy right on the tail. I mean, pow, smacks her on the tail. And she's like, who is that little boy right there? Well, I'm standing there talking to Josh, and he walks up to me, and he says, what y'all doing? And I said, well, me and Mr. Josh here are the ones that gives out spankings. He said, oh, He said, "Do you spank hard?" I said, "Oh yeah, it's tough." And I said, "No." I said, "Oh yeah, real hard." He said, "Oh, that's tough." And he looked at Josh. He said, "What about you? You spank hard?" Josh said, "I got a wooden paddle." He said, "Oh boy," and walked away. So I'm telling you, man, like I just knew that boy was going to be a fire pistol all week long.
I mean, day one, he's saying cuss words. He's flipping people off. It's just what he knew. That's
right.
And so people don't understand that our week of camp. Most church camps, you've got 99% members of the church's kids are there.
Right.
Not Hattiesburg week. And so you have about 60% of the kids are in the Lord's church,
think about how 40%. How much you have to pour into your kids in order for I'll just let me just say this in a way that I mean exactly what it says and nothing else. The evolution arguments and all that stuff don't bother me, because we've poured it into our kids to the fact that we wanted them to establish this as their own understanding and not something that I'm telling them. We wanted them to work through the world's view on these things, I'm fine with the world telling my kids their view on this, not in the sense of I hope it influences them. I'm not saying that at all, but they need to, I don't mean protect in the sense of be a helicopter daddy or a mama, but you take your kids to camp and I don't even worry, to be honest with you, about the stuff that my kids are going to hear or things like that at camp. I just know that's going to happen, but we've already dealt with that beforehand. I don't know if you do it, Bob, but we have conversations. I even talked to Carson on the way down there. Did he tell you that I talked to him on the way down there? And I was like, because, Carson came back home with us Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, look at the shop, new equipment and stuff.
Yeah, and he hung out with us for Sunday afternoon, and we fed them and let them do whatever stupid kid stuff they're going to do till we went to camp. And I was talking to Carson. I was like, because I didn't have this conversation with my boys, and I knew you would have it with him too, but I wanted to have because it just helps, right? You just have these peripheral conversations, and I was like, so Carson, how do you think Satan's going to get after you this week? What do you think is going to be some of your challenges? And he stopped and he thought about it a minute. And I said, son, I love you, right? He said, yes, sir. I said, you needed to already have that conversation with yourself. You needed to think about that before I had this conversation with you, because if you had this conversation with you, you won't have to have it when you're in the throes of it. And I said, so just think about the things that you can watch out for now, so that when the things that you don't watch out for, you've already made up your decisions on the other ones. You don't have to make, an algorithm of a decision at that point. Just make these decisions now. And and it's not that, Carson, he's 16. That's why he needs help, right? That's why they need parental influence. That's why they need good daddies and good leadership in their lives. But the blessing of a week like that for our kids is that they can be a powerful influence because of what the when I say the Hattiesburg, our collective youth kids and those people can then, when you bring in the world, all of a sudden you're going to be the opposing force. That's one of the blessings of the Next Tech is that for so long, we've taken our kids and put them in extracurricular activities, and they've been the minority, to where the fact that, all of a sudden, we just hope that we don't lose ground with these, engagements. Well, like with our Next Tech, especially when Carson was here, we were the majority. So we kind of, we were the spiritual, our kids were the spiritual bastions of hope then. And so you get to really do some great things with that. Well, that's what the camp week does. And so, you think about politics then, right? If you've already made up your mind that you're not going to let those things affect you. I gotta, I don't know if it's because either way, I got to do an interview with the local news I think it's this week. I don't know what it is, but they want to come out and do some video from the shop and talk about what the Next Tech is doing and everything like that. And I'm actually just going to send them. I asked them, could I just send you some B-roll footage that Ben had shot and we had shot? Because I think that'll do a better job than what they'll shoot, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And
because you cared about the shot. They're the hireling, you're the shepherd.
Exactly. And so but I want to be able to tell the story the right way. I want to control the narrative. And because I had a phone call, it wasn't long ago, from the Fox News, And it was a Virginia number, and I thought I actually knew the number. And so I answered it. And I usually don't answer the Virginia numbers because I didn't change mine. And so they're usually just, you've been selected for this financial, whatever garbage. But it was a guy in Arizona.
Shares Clearinghouse.
Yeah. But it was a guy that was located with the national Fox News in Arizona. And he wanted to do this interview. So we were doing this thing. We're having this conversation. And then he started asking me these political questions. And I said, I'm just not going to answer that. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, no, he said, why not? Don't you have an opinion? I said, well, of course I've got an opinion on it. I mean, all of us have an opinion on these things. He said, well, don't you think that wouldn't you like your people to know your opinion? Or he said it, I don't remember how he said it, but I know that's what he meant by the question. And I said, no. To be honest with you, I said, that's probably the worst thing in this situation I could do. And he said, why do you think that? I said, well, just because I know that you're asking me all these questions about what the Lord has done, for our congregation here and what he's doing with us. I said, I don't want to mix I don't want you to use the Lord's goodness and his greatness and then set aside on that and say, I want you to realize that I'm capturing what he's done in him only. Because if you set that over here with my political opinion, what you're going to do is you're going to say, look at all the good things these people are doing, and you're not giving him the credit. And I said, then you're going to use this over here to say, and look how they think about politics. You should think the same way they do, because look at what validation you can get. Look at the validation we're credentializing these guys as good people. You need to believe and think like they do. And I even told him, I might even think and believe the same things you do exactly, but this is not the time and place for that conversation. And I'm just not going to have it with you, because politics don't do anything but divide us. I mean, Daniel,
hey, call me up after you run the story, and and that's. But I think if I know Chris well enough, Ben, Chris is trying to put so much of Jesus into this conversation that they can't even soundbite Jesus out. He's going to get in there somewhere.
I'm telling you, man, like I'm going to try my best, especially like I want to do this one for WDAM, and I don't even know how many people watch the local news anymore, but I tell you what, I've made up my mind is that I am going to make sure that, like you said, every statement that I do, that they can't cut it out. There's got to be some kind of way that whatever little snippet or blurb, I'm actually going to try to get them to film the interview part here at the church building. That's what I'm going to try to do, is get them to do the interview part here at the church building. And then if they want to come to the shop and do some video into the shop, we can. But I want to do it here because it's just, Bob, I mean, Daniel 4 and verse 17 says, the decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know. Now think about this. All these credentials. We just want all these people to really be important people, and the words of these holy ones. This is the thing we want you to know. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. Daniel 4:17 says, God, if Trump becomes president again, it will be because God does it. And verse 17 says, he sets over it the lowest of men. You just think about the lowest of men. It's not like the humblest. That's not the word there. We're talking about the politicians universally are the worst people to be around. I mean, that's why Congress's approval rating is always at 30%. They're just, nobody ever sits and says, you know what? Congress is really looking after us. They're really doing a good job. I mean, our roads are in good shape. They pick up my trash every Friday, and it seems like our schools are doing good. No, all the way up to the top. And so no matter what happens, the lowest of men are the easiest to manipulate. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Pharaoh was easy to manipulate. God told Moses, very few times do you hear, like in Revelation 2, 3, and 4, to the angel of the church at Ephesus, write exactly what I'm going to say. Jesus says, write these words down verbatim. But when Moses says, what am I going to tell him? You say these things. These are the things you say, and watch what's going to happen. You'll see how it unfolds after that. And so don't let the people that you think are the most coy, and don't let the people who you think are the most important Don't let those people influence your life. You know, certainly Saturday could have went one of two ways with 2 inches, right? I mean, it could have went really bad, and I don't know what the election cycle will be like this year, but I can promise you this, that just Saturday, if you could use that as a theme, it's going to be the nastiest election cycle we have ever seen. I mean, it's just going to be a nasty, nasty, nasty mess. And it's going to, no matter which side of the coin you're on with this, it's going to taste real bad in your mouth when it's all said and done. We appreciate you guys.